I've decided to release some of the content that was only available in the course onto YouTube in the public domain because I think it'll be beneficial to people. The other reason is that the course content, I want it to be evergreen. And the fact of the matter is, as I actually said in this video, that things have always been changing and my approach has been changing. Perhaps one of the most valuable parts of this video is just going to be at the end of the video where I, in this modern format, comment on some of the things that have changed in this approach. And the real thing that I want to say is simple is sustainable. I went into a lot of detail for this article and I will not deny that it was very valuable and I've learned a lot, and I often quote some of the things that I've learned from reading this article and doing it in this way, but I don't think it's sustainable to do this for all the things that you enter into your Logseq database. It will drive you crazy. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll also know that I'm no longer using Logseq for everything. I'm using Tana for some of my knowledge management. And for that reason, I'm wanting to make the content that was only available in Logseq Mastery on the workflow side of things also available in a written format. So I am bringing the 5 P's of knowledge management into written format on the website. Go and have a look at that. The link is below. Another part of the reason for doing this is making the course more accessible from a pricing perspective, and to reduce the content that is unique to the course, I can now reduce the price of the course, which I've done. So go and have a look at the website if you still want to buy the full course. There's a lot of detail in the tutorial section and it will still be very valuable for you to go through, although this will also help you in small ways. You'll see that this is an older version of myself, which still had dreadlocks, and the recording quality wasn't as good as I think it is now, but nonetheless, I hope it is still helpful for you. I decided to include some extra optional materials in this course to help people who might be working with their own systems to just see how it is done or how I'm doing it, and give a couple of ideas and suggestions maybe, and just basically walk through my thinking in how I'm setting things up. And this is 100% likely going to change in the future, but for now this is what I have decided on. Or this is how I'm actually doing it. So it's nice just to give a snapshot in time and potentially even see how things evolve. So what I've been doing is reading through an article and doing the outlining, editing, and a little bit of tagging up front. And this relates to one of the modules about the importing, editing, and tagging workflow. But what I'm doing now is I'm going over like a final pass of this article, just to make sure that everything is retrievable at a later stage. Now, I've gone into depth for this article because it's something that's very interesting to me. It's all about ontology and systems ontology. So I wouldn't do this for every article, but it's quite important for me that I really grasp the core concepts here and make sure that I can return back to them. I'm also going to explain just a couple of things that I've done from a formatting perspective and a layout perspective. And again, it's very open-ended, so I hope this is helpful to you. Okay, so the article that I have been editing is called Ontology is Overrated, Categories, Links, and Tags. If I just open this up, shift-click, this one here. This is the original article. It comes from the Clay Shirky's writings about the internet, so this website is not available anymore, and it's a long one, but it really, really is very good and very interesting. So I went through it in detail and read it up, highlighted it. I'm not going to go over that highlight readwise workflow because that will come at later stages, probably on the channel, because that's not important. People will use different solutions for that. So what I've done here is just put in your metadata. It's on my daily page, and then I've got this headline block or this block heading to break it down. And I was looking at a couple of things that day when I was looking at advanced queries clearly, but now I can just close that and zoom in on just the article that I'm inputting here. And I've given it some high-level tags, ontology, classification, tags. Maybe not so important to have tags over there because it comes in at different stages in the article. Now just looking back, but it's okay. I can leave it there. And I might actually, if I just shift click this and say, open up there, I've got a whole bunch of things here, some fleeting thoughts, some output that I've put here. So not a super useful tag, but nonetheless, it's okay. Okay. So I've just put a summary of the article here. That's not something which I would typically do for every article, but I started and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Just said what he's talking about here, just so I can return back to it. And then I saw here that he called the classification as discontents, and I was like, where has that been used before? Like, I know that it's somewhere, and I just went and I Googled, and Sigmund Freud had written about civilization and its discontents. And what I'm doing here now is I'm breaking down certain questions for myself. So if I just actually zoom out, so TO, I have identified questions that were peaked or that emerged when I was actually reading through this and thinking, how would I want to make sense of this? And I don't go and create a question block for each of these things, because then it would be a lot of work and I'd actually never ever return back to it. But what I do is I create this little hashtag. So hashtag Q, this is literally just I'm using markdown headings there just to make it a bit bolder. And then I say hashtag Q, what is ontology? And then what I can do now is if I go to ontology page, so I go to ontology and I've got all these things here, and then I can say filter for Q. And then I have my 6 linked references. And then I can go and see all the questions that I've got here. Again, this filtering isn't working 100% well. It's more of like I'm building this in for the future, knowing that eventually this will be amazing. I could do a query with ontology and Q. So let me just actually open my query page. So Control K and then query page, Shift Enter. And I've got some things I was playing with. Let me just delete that. And actually, I'll just collapse it for now, just to show you the points. Okay. Okay, and then what I can do here is I can say / query, where I have and ontology and Q. And there we go. There's all my questions on ontology, and yeah, all the answers there too. So that's just a nice way to be able to break it down. Okay, so let me just close that. That's why I do it like that. And go back here. And then similarly, like I could get ontology definitions. That's that granularity of breaking it down in the tree-like structure. Okay, so here I then also have some tags A, just to give a visual breakdown of like what things are happening here. So that this is a question, this is the answer. Not very necessary. But yeah, ontology has to do with making clear and explicit statements about entities in a particular domain. Okay. There's a difference in personal knowledge management ontologies. And here, yeah. PKM, I might actually say PKM definitions here. Definitions. See? It's not harming or helping. How does ontology help us make sense of the world? So here I would say hashtag sense making. There we go. This is more for future reference, like this next block here. What are some great examples of where ontology's gone wrong? It's just interesting. And it's just 3 examples where they were related to the number of books that had to be arranged, and how we don't have the shelf constraint of libraries in order to create our ontologies. So here in the Russian library, Marxism, Lenin, maybe I'll just highlight that so that interesting example here when it comes back. Dewey Decimal System, Library of Congress. Hypothetically, I mean, these aren't super important for me. I'm trying to reduce these highlights here. I'm going to change the way that Readwise exports them, but because I don't need them. For a book, it's nice to be able to go back to the specific highlight position, but for an article, I don't really want to go back to the highlight position. And if I do go back to an article, I'll just click on the main article and go there. So there, Um, yeah, that's right. This is actually taking me to the website, so it's not a JPEG. Oh, it is a JPEG. Okay, that's fine. Um, I mean, this is interesting. So, the Library of Congress's categories, the Balkan Peninsula is that little red thing over there, and Africa and Asia are these blue, huge areas, but there's just more books on the Balkan Peninsula than Africa and Asia. So, anyways, here, what does success look like in classification? This doesn't seem like it's anything actually really relevant, but I might just say idealism. Idealism there. Okay. The idea of a perfect scheme is, and then I'll highlight that. So there, I'll highlight that to make it bold. But it's not something I need to come back. Here's just some stories on like why managing large quantities of data is challenging. It's talking about the periodic table of elements and how that's managing a large array of different elements, and it's very difficult to do even that. Hierarchy is a good way to manage physical objects. So it's talking about books. I mean, I could either tag that there, so link that there, hierarchy, or I could say hashtag hierarchy at the end there. But yeah, it's not super important that I return back to it. If I wanted to use the tags plugin, which has disappeared now because I changed themes, and sometimes that happens, I would then say hashtag hierarchy there, and then I would be able to go to my tags, go to my plugins, turn that off and on, and then I could go to my tags, hierarchy. And I've got 3 things that are tagged with hierarchy: network note taking, management reflections. Yeah. Okay, so here, where did Yahoo go wrong in the initial categorization efforts? I've got a lot of quotes here, which is probably not the best practice. What I'll do is I'll highlight the quotes because I figure that's interesting, but I like to put this in my own words as much as possible. But where I have quotes, I will always use a quote block. And I've stopped using the quote inputs as a in the same way that I have the articles metadata because it just became cumbersome. I still have some of them in my database because like it's an old system. But what I do now, I don't even use this quote there and enter things. I just use the markdown block, which is that right or greater than sign, greater than sign, yes, left to right. Okay. I'm linking it here to exactly what Gordon Brander said. I couldn't actually find where it was though, but yeah. I might just say categorization. It might actually be good to put the tags categorization here at the top. Classification, categorization. Yeah. Categorization. Why do I do the square brackets when I don't really need to? It's just for interoperability. If I was to ever change systems, I don't want to have, you can do this in Logseq. But, I mean, that's terribly inconsistent, so I'd want to just keep those the same. Okay. This is a story about Yahoo, so I want to be able to come back to Yahoo maybe sometime. Here I might actually say bidirectional links. Starting to talk about how did links evolve. Here I've already tagged it with aliases, and I can go and see other things that I've tagged with aliases. There we go. There's a tweet talking about some things about semantic graphs, RDF, OWL, which is, what is open web language or something like that. We'll just close that. Bum, bum. Yeah, semantic triples. That's definitely a concept which I've used before. Evolution in pictures. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. Pretty sure there's a way that I could remove this using regex, and one day I'll get there, but I'm not there at the moment. This is a story about Google, and now I'm putting things in my own words. So it's like they came along and understood that the limiting factor was not the shelf. It was all centered on retrieval. And I could also say there, efficient retrieval rather than browsing. And browsing would probably be a topic, probably, yeah. And then I could open up the comment here. Well, this is the direct quote. So I'm putting my own words above the direct quotes so that I'm seeing what I'm writing first. And that's the way that I typically prefer to do that. These are just annoying me now. So much time and effort. It actually doesn't make, it makes no difference, but it just irritates me. Anyways, it's fine. So here we're talking about retrieval, and we're talking browse versus search-based. Actually, I think that might be an interesting concept. Browse versus search-based. And that, actually, I might want to say retrieval there, and then that tag of retrieval, what have I got there already? Not many things, yeah. Focus on active retrieval rather than excuse me, rereading, which is passive, space repetition. This was actually more about active recall. So this is the one that I've used in the previous video. And I'm going to delete that, remove. It's difficult. It's going to stay in there now. Yeah, anyways, okay. The way to do that, if you can't do it quickly, is just shift click, open that up there, and then say active retrieval. Because this is not the context that I'm actually thinking about there. There, active recall is actually below. But anyways, because here I'm thinking about like retrieval from a search perspective, or like resurfacing information, as opposed to like the testing thing, which is what I'm looking at there. And now what I'll do is I can just delete this because I don't need it anymore. Because I've tagged with efficient retrieval, which is a concept for me, and then I've got here browse versus search-based retrieval. I could create a spectrum there, which is something which I've spoken about before, but this is not something which I'm going to look at often. So what this allows me to do is just to say, if I want to search, say Control K, and I can say browse, and there we go, browse versus search-based retrieval. And I could also just say search and then see what comes up. Yeah. So I'll be able to search that. A little bit more difficult, search retrieval. Not coming up as effectively. There we go. Here it comes. So yeah, it came up eventually, and I can find what I want very easily just by saying Control K and searching for that. Okay, here's Boolean logic. That might be interesting. Something which I've been thinking about, which I haven't actually done, is creating a bunch of metaphors. So metaphors as a namespace, metaphor, and then saying, I'll have to put this in square brackets, metaphor, and then something about a shelf, like the internet is not a shelf, or like information as a shelf. Information storage as a shelf. That's terrible, but yeah, it's fine. I'll now be able to find it if I click on metaphor, and I can go there. And at some point later down the line, I can then edit that out. Let me close this on the right here. Is categorization a good way to arrange information? And you can see here that I'm actually using Markdown level 3, and previously I was using Markdown level 4, or at least up here I was at some point. Yeah, so So that's not super important. I mean, if I go back up to this this thing here, this is markdown level 3, and my content is always markdown level 2. So, or my content header on the page. So this content header there, just because I don't want lines everywhere on my page I don't want it to be separated. Anyways, okay, yeah. So spectrums. Is categorization a good way to arrange information? So it's one way, but it's not the only way. And here I had said top down versus bottom up, but it's one of my spectrums, so I added top down versus bottom up spectrums link over there. Yeah, some example here. Some areas where ontology works well. This is probably related to collective knowledge management. So collective knowledge management, which is another tag of mine, collective knowledge management. And yeah, both of those would actually go underneath there. Or I could just copy this tag, which is fine. And later on I can come and clean this up. These links here are annoying me. Why is categorization hard? So here, am I writing a lot about categorization? Not at the moment, but I could say challenges. So categorization, challenges, and then later down the line I could come and make the namespace if I wanted to, but just something which will give you another filter and query maybe. Yeah. Or just like a nice reminder. I actually like this fortune telling, or like I might actually want to come back to fortune telling and mind reading. Or those are cool concepts that I'd like to return back to, or might want to be able to link. Like if I'm talking about mind reading in some future context, maybe it's around, I don't know, ESP or telepathicness or whatever, then you can say, well, classification or categorization is the exact same if I'm trying to read the mind of other people, something like that. So yeah, there's some link there, so why not just make it there? It's free. Fortune telling, again, same thing. Okay, this is talking about collective knowledge management again. Maybe I'll actually move this tag up to the high level there. It's talking about unique identifiers. This is actually important. I should probably just say have a unique identifier. Unique, because that's a concept of unique identifiers. And I've written it there because I'm thinking in future in collective knowledge management systems, it's just important that you have a unique identifier across your organization. So a project has a unique identifier. If someone brings a resource in, it's a unique identifier, and maybe people will be able to classify that in different ways. Before I get into tagging here, I've got the spectrums top down, bottom up again. It's often to do your tagging your organization after the fact to avoid the cognitive burden. So this is something which I've just written, was inspired by this, but yeah, it just shows my own mental point of departure for this, that I believe in top down or bottom up and top down complementing each other and not being two separate things necessarily. Okay, tagging. Why is tagging valuable? This is super interesting here. So what I've done is there's a lot going on underneath here, and I've just created a high level H2, which I never usually do, but I've said tagging up there, just because all of these are H3, or yeah, it's just a way of breaking it down visually, I guess, as well. I mean, yeah, maybe one day I'll have a perfect system, but at the moment it's still developing. Okay, so again, I've got this concept of efficient retrieval. So if I actually open this concept here, efficient retrieval, I can now see a whole bunch of places that I've tagged it in. So There we go. This article, this thing here. So if I'm wanting to talk about efficient retrieval, I can now aggregate a whole bunch of different sources for that, which is great. Close that. Here are some of my own observations. Yeah, group tagging rather than centralized control. So I'm actually going to say here decentralization, because this is talking about decentralization in general. Decentralization. Talking about wisdom of the crowds. It's why I think Goodreads is a useful service, because it aggregates people's ratings so that you don't have to go and do that yourself. Maybe you don't trust everyone on Goodreads, but it's just a way of doing that. Yeah, again, I've thought about how this applies to organizations, collective knowledge management, something which I'm thinking about, like with Logseq Sync maybe. Again, there's probably something here about top-down versus bottom-up, but this is more about expending effort. So maybe I want to say decentralization semantics in the future, maybe. Here, I enjoyed this. Like, yeah, it's about defining the Venn diagrams of overlap. So Venn diagrams as a concept, and yeah, I think definitely got this concept of everything being on a spectrum, which I actually haven't started yet, have I? Everything is relative. Yeah. There we go. I'll use a tag there just to make it more visually palatable. Well, this is definitely not mine. That's a quote. So this is his idea of like, here comes everybody. It's the book he wrote, where the collective becomes the filter for quality. I've already actually done this here, so here I've talked about PKM principles, and I've also said this is a spectrum of like bugs versus features, because there'll be maybe I'm wanting to write an article at one point in the future on like bugs versus features. This is one thing, like information overwhelm is a feature, not a bug. That's just since the printing press. I think I was watching a video of his, and he said, since the printing press, information has just become ubiquitous and abundant. And if something exists or is a problem for such a long time, maybe it's the point that you determine that it's actually a fact. Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, that's what happens after it gets published that matters. Oopsie, that was paste. I wanted to bold it. Here we go. Bold that, and then something about quality here, like a quality or heuristic or something like that. I just want to be able to come back to it at some point. Heuristics. That's not very well done, but anyways. This is actually probably on my spectrum, signal versus noise. Down there. And again, I've created extra CSS, well, additional CSS for that and other things in my database. Just nice to be able to like visualize, for me at least. Here's a whole bunch of quotes that relate to that point. Yeah. Okay. This is probably something to do with efficient retrieval as well. Efficient retrieval. Cool. So I've just gone back to the camera now. As you can see, this one I've gone through quite a lot of detail, and I'm trying to do things at a much higher level now, rather than like trying to link every word or or make sure that absolutely everything is tagged, because I can very easily come back to this article and just quickly go look through the questions, because everything is nicely outlined and indented, and then makes it very nice for me to find the information that I'm looking for, or just like resurface some sort of interesting insight that I had at the time of editing. So as promised, here are some of the things that I have changed. And the real one is simple is sustainable. Now, I don't process long articles like this anymore. I haven't been doing that much reading. But if I look at a simple one, let's just say Henrik Carlson, because I know I like his stuff. And you can just see there, I really just keep it as simple and I leave it as quotes. I don't try and write things in my own words anymore, because there's just too many inputs. And if you try and do this consistently for everything that's coming in, writing it in your own words, all the things that everyone says to memorize these things, it just isn't sustainable for me. So I'll just take a couple of quotes, and let's actually get into the next part over here, which is highlighting. And this is just a little bit of CSS that I've put into my custom CSS. And you can just go there, and let's just go here. You could say settings, and then in your custom CSS, edit custom CSS, you'd copy and paste that in. And what that does is when I highlight something, so I'll just say, let's highlight this over here, Control-Shift-H, that highlights, and it just highlights it and makes it bold. So if I didn't have this, let's go to custom CSS. I'll just do it in my VS Code, just so that you can see quickly. If I turn it off, it will now look like that, which is not as nice visually. So that's just a nice piece of CSS to put in to help you see what's happening. Then the next thing is trying to reduce my use of namespaces. So I initially used namespaces for a lot of things in my workspace, but I found in order to be more applicable or more usable in Obsidian or other programs, that namespaces just aren't good for extensibility. So if I look at these spectrums over here, when I was doing my writing, when I do my writing, let me just say not doing, I have all of these spectrums that I like to think about, or like things as polarities and paradoxes, and I have slowly been taking these away. So being versus becoming is one of those paradoxes, and what would that look like over here? So there's chaos versus order, and I've got order versus chaos. It's actually duplication over here. So let's just say shift click that over there, and then order versus chaos. The first thing I would do, well, let me actually just do this. I would say order versus chaos, change the page name. I would then open this as a page, and then I'd say order versus chaos. So I'm consolidating those two things. Already exists, merge it, yes. And the reality is that I actually wanted it to be the other way around, because I will never talk about order versus chaos. I'll talk about chaos versus order. Cool. Yeah, there's probably going to be some duplication here, but let's just go back to spectrums. And then I'm just using Control K over here. I realize I'm doing this very quickly, but then I'll say chaos versus order. And now if I go into that chaos versus order, I'll see all the different link references over here. And if I refresh this, it will show up over there. Okay, so that's going to take a few seconds. So there we go. It's now updated, and all of those things are consolidated in one place. Okay, the final thing that I want to mention is that I'm not using this Q and A thing as I'd previously done. It is a very good way to process an article, but it's just so time consuming. And yes, you can go and filter and do all the things. I've seen other creators recommend this and build systems around it. But for me, just not sustainable. So I've stopped doing that, and yeah, trying to keep things as simple as possible. I hope that video was helpful for you. If a lot of this went over your head, then it's probably beneficial to have a look at the full course, because it really does take you from beginner to advanced in all the steps, and will help you get a grasp of the major concepts that make Logseq such a good tool for knowledge management. As I said, you can also have a look at the website. I'm publishing articles that have some of the course content there. You can subscribe for those updates. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in a future video.